Oh, the late night madness. I swear I don't intentionally do madness videos last thing at night. It just usually percolates in my brain during the day, and then it's like, all right, let's do this. Now, this is a unrestricted free agent list from TSN, and I left it in their order, even though there's some guys that I think are. I would put Bernier ahead of Kempney. I'd probably put Bernier ahead of Maroon. The idea of being the most important free agents at the top, and the least important are the guys near the bottom. So you got Tavares, JVR, Paul Stastny, James Neal, Mike Green, Tyler Bozak, Rick Nash, David Perron, Jack Johnson, Carter Hutton, John Moore, Thomas Vanek, Patrick Maroon, Michael Kempney, Jonathan Bernier, Riley Nash, Derek Ryan, Brooks Orpik, Robin Leonard, Ian Cole, Michael Grabner, Tobias Reeder, Leo Komarov, Calvin DeHaan, Kyle Brodziak, Valtteri Filppula, Matt Calvert, Anton Hudobin, Thomas Plekanec, Dan Hamhughes, and Peter Mrazek. So those are your top 31. Off the top of my head, the ones that, I could see Tavares going to San Jose. The ones from Vegas that are going, Neal and Perron, will be interested to see where they go. In goal, your best option's probably Carter Hutton. I think Bernier's probably going to be under the radar. Robin Leonard's definitely under the radar. And can Peter Mrazek bounce back, or does he end up in the KHL? What happens to him? And if you're looking for depth on the blue line, well, Hamhughes isn't done yet. Calvin DeHaan, I'm kind of surprised that he's still out there. And I think he'll probably end up getting a decent offer. Grabner, are you getting New Jersey Grabner, or are you getting the New York Rangers Grabner? And would anybody be surprised to see the Rangers put in an offer and bring him back? So I've gone through and tried to figure out, just looking at current depth charts. So not taking into account rookies, not taking into account free agents that they may bring back. Just looking at depth charts and where I think they may be in the market. And I didn't look at cap space because I'm not worried about that, because there's always, you can buy guys out and all that other stuff. Anaheim, I think they need somebody down the middle. Even if Kessler comes back, they need somebody down the middle. And they could stand either a 5 or 6 defenseman, meaning not necessarily top 4. They don't have to add a top 4, but a 5 or a 6 I think would be good for them. For Arizona, 1 or 2 wingers. And top 6, top 9 wingers. And again, a 5 or 6 defenseman. Boston, I think, is pretty solid as they are right now. I think they could use a backup. Yes, they're in the Tavares talks. Yes, there's rumors they want Rick Nash back. But honestly, if they have to go with what they have right now, I think that's still a pretty solid lineup. Buffalo, they need help on the wing. And I think a number 6 defenseman would be good. And they need a goalie. So there's a few holes I see in Buffalo there that they may look to fix starting on the 1st. Calgary, I honestly look at the roster right now and I say it's pretty good. I don't look at anybody in that roster and say, well, they could probably upgrade. There are areas where they could probably use an upgrade in net, but I'm not sure how you do that. Do you put Gillies back in the minors, or has he learned as much in the American League as he can? Maybe you split Smith and Gillies up. Maybe split games between Riddick and Smith. But really, in general, in terms of areas they need to upgrade, I don't really see that much with the Flames. Carolina, it's a goalie. Outside of that, I think the roster is pretty solid, considering, and especially if Svechnikov makes this team right out of camp. I think they're a pretty solid team, and I'm confused when I look at the roster as to why they miss the playoffs every year. I think Chicago, other than a center and a goalie, could they use defensive depth? Probably, but when I look at their top 6, there isn't really anybody to look at and say he shouldn't be in there. And that's kind of the thing that I look at. Colorado, I think they could use a top 6 winger and either a number 2 or 3 center. And they have cap space to get both. And because of the fact that the team's on an upswing right now, I don't think that they'll be an unattractive location to go to. Columbus, 5 or 6 defensemen. And I don't mean 5 or 6 as in they need 5 or 6 defensemen. I mean they need a number 5 or a number 6 defenseman, just in that area. Losing Jack Johnson really shouldn't hurt them. Dallas needs a top 4 defenseman. They do. And Heiskanen may be the answer, but he's not in there right now on the depth chart, and I'm not handing anything to him. And they need a backup. If they go with Landon Bowe or they go with McKenna, I'm nervous. Detroit needs 2 defensemen and a backup. if Jimmy Howard stays. If Howard goes, their whole goaltending battery may need an upgrade. And that's the one thing I look at with Detroit. I like their forward group in general. As long as guys like Tyler Bertuzzi, for instance, continue to develop on their trajectory, I think they're okay. The Oilers need top six wingers. And I understand Yamamoto's coming up, and it looks like he's probably going to be great, but you can't bank on that. Just like Puljujarvi, you can't bank on necessarily Puljujarvi having that breakthrough. If you have a lot of these guys that you're just, oh, he's going to break through, and you're handing them spots, that can be a problem. Florida, I don't know. Florida looks pretty solid. Maybe a goaltender. And I only say that because is Reimer a starter if Luongo falters or gets injured? Is Luongo close enough to the end of his career that you've really got to figure out this goaltending battery without him? Do you have an uncomfortable conversation with him? LA, I think they could use a fourth line winger. I look at their fourth line and I say, you know what, they could probably use another depth winger. Minnesota, I don't know. Minnesota looks pretty solid. And this is where Minnesota, for me, is a challenge. Yes, Minnesota, as it's built right now, is not a Stanley Cup contender. Rumor has it that Chuck Fletcher has asked, or no, not Chuck Fletcher, Paul Fenton has asked for a team trade list from Eric Stahl. And if they're going to get rid of Stahl, I'm not sure where Minnesota's headed with that. But, you know, it's out there. Montreal, again, not giving Kotkaniemi just a spot in the lineup where they are right now. I think they need two centers, and they just need depth. I think when you look at this team, it's depth. Blue line, they definitely need depth. They could use a top four blue liner, but it's depth pretty much all over. If Niemi's the backup, sure, he had a great second half last season. He had a good story with Montreal, but if he falters at the start of this year and they have to go with Lindgren, how comfortable are they with Lindgren? If Niemi falters and then something happens with Price, which both of those things could have, like, there's a lot of unknowns with Montreal, is what I'm saying. Nashville, they look pretty solid. You could argue maybe one, maybe two depth players, but nothing major that you look at and say, well, if they don't add anybody, they're screwed. I don't see them that way at all. New Jersey, I think they could use a number 5 or a number 6 defenseman. Other than that, their roster's pretty solid. And now, when I say this, I'm not saying that all of these teams are contenders. I'm not equalizing all these teams. I'm just saying that with where they're at, what they may be looking for, this is what I see. New York, the Islanders, defense. And if Tavares goes, they need a 1 or a 2 center. Barzal, great rookie year. Rookie of the year. Fantastic. Great story. Very proud of him. But they need another center there. And if they went with what they have right now, I'd be nervous about their center depth. And goaltending. They need the goaltending. They desperately need the goaltending. The Rangers, a number 5 or a number 6 defenseman. I think Pionk's going to get into that top 4. I do. I think Pionk or Gilmore, one or the other, is going to jump into the top 4. And then that'll bump somebody down. But I still think they need one more depth defenseman in there for the top 6. Ottawa, I think a center would do them well. And I mean a 2 or a 3. Maybe a 1. I mean, is Duchesne a first-line center? Does he really, you know, that's an uncomfortable conversation. A top 4 defenseman would be useful, and if they're looking to get rid of Anderson, or even if they're not, I think they need an upgrade in goal. Philly, they need a top 6 winger, and I don't think anybody who's a Flyers fan is going to get mad at me. I'm not saying anything about Voracek. I'm not saying anything about Simmons. And you know, if JVR goes back to Philly, that's fantastic. That fixes a lot of things for Philly and their goaltending. I know they have Elliott. I know they have Neuwirth. They're both signed through next season. It's not immediate, but is it? And that's the problem with Philly. Pittsburgh, their defense was not great in the playoffs, and I think they could use some kind of an upgrade in there. I'm not sure how to make that happen, and I'm not sure of the math on this, but somebody on this list may end up coming into Pittsburgh, and then they may move somebody out to add some depth somewhere else, maybe a veteran backup. I understand that Jari looks good. DeSmith looked okay at points last year, but with Matt Murray, would he be better suited to have a veteran backup? You're not going to get Fleury back, but if you can have a goaltender in there, sort of like what Anaheim had with Ryan Miller last year, that kind of a setup, I think that might be better for Matt Murray. And I understand that Matt Murray went through, losing his father and all of these, and that's absolutely out there as a reason that he may have struggled at times this past season. And I'm not trying to say anything bad about Murray. Just maybe you need a veteran backup to sort of help the kid out. San Jose, I think they could use a number 5 or a number 6 defenseman, and just their fourth line, I think, needs a little bit of a shakeup. I don't think that San Jose needs much. So if they add if they add Tavares, they move into contender's position. They really do. St. Louis, I think, could use a number 3 or a number 4 center. Maybe a number 2, depending on which Blues fan you ask. But I definitely think center depth needs help. And of course, with Hutton going, what are they going to do with goaltenders? So I'm not just putting backup up here because is Jake Allen going to be that starter for 55, 60 games, or are they going to bring in somebody to share the load? As a Dallas fan, I got to tell you that doesn't always work out. What are they going to do? Tampa, I think, could use a little bit of something on the fourth line with Kunitz leaving. I think they could use a little bit of something on the fourth line. I don't think there's any expensive issues for Tampa. I think that they can fix it for relatively cheap. Toronto, center. I'm thinking number 3 and a number 4 center. Now, if they bring in Tavares, what that does is Tavares becomes number 1 center, Matthews drops down to 2, and then Kadri drops to 3rd. And that would be probably the best top 3 center combination, at least one of the best top 3 center combinations in the league. I'm not saying best, because right away you're going to have Pittsburgh fans and fans of all the other teams. What about us? We're the greatest. So, one of. Close to. Right up there. Pretty cool. Pretty nifty. Toronto Maple Leafs. Book it. Leafs are nifty. It's June 25th, 2018. Vancouver, where do you start? Center, top 6 winger, offense on the blue line. You look at their blue line, and their top 6 is they all look like NHL level guys, but how many of them are actual offensive blue liners? That's why they brought in Derek Pouliot this past season, and it didn't really work out. And goalie. I understand that they're both signed through next year, and I know Demko's coming up, but they have to do something with their goaltending tandem here. I'm not sure. I'm not sure who takes Nelson. If you trade Nelson, I'm not sure that trading Markstrom would make any sense. Trading Markstrom might put Demko into a situation where he has to be the starter too soon. There's a lot of uncomfortable conversations to be had by the Canucks this summer. Vegas, I think top 9 wingers. I think with what they've got set up, I think adding 1 or 2 wingers would be good. I think their center depth, Eakin and Howla and Carlson. Going into last season, we might have looked at that and said, well, that's not good enough. But you know what? It's still pretty good. And a number 5 or a number 6 defenseman. So really, Vegas isn't that far off. Capitals, I think they'll rebuild their fourth line. I think a number 5 or a number 6 defenseman is in order. And Winnipeg, I don't know. Winnipeg looks pretty solid. So there you go. That's my opinion of where teams are at, where teams might be. And you can try to figure out which guys on this line fill in for spots that are needed here. So like an Ian Cole. An Ian Cole could be a number 4 blue liner for maybe Dallas. Or maybe Columbus brings him back as a number 5. And then that could help fill in, depth chart position where maybe they need somebody. The trick with this really is, and where I don't envy GMs is, you can't just assume that a rookie's going into the lineup. I even look at Buffalo right now, and you can't just say, well, Dahlin's going to be this great. He's in there. He's projected to be in their lineup already. And honestly, if Dahlin's not ready, then Buffalo needs 2 defensemen, by my counting. But I'm agreeing that Dahlin's probably pretty special, and he's probably going to be a top 4 blue liner. But as a GM, it's got to be frustrating because you don't want to look at your depth chart during the summer, so even before training camp, and say, okay, well, I've got 2 rookies in the lineup. Something that Benning's done and people have criticized him for, and I haven't, is he'll bring guys in to fill in the lineup so he doesn't need a rookie. I'm totally fine with that. Make rookies earn their spot. So I'm looking for GMs to fill their lineup, and then in the fall when rookies come in, that's when you see a guy get waived and you go, wow, really? He's out? Or you see him get traded and you're like, wow, they traded that guy. He looked like he was a kind of a key guy last year. To what happened? And it's that a rookie outplayed him. And then they'll call like a Detroit and say, hey, I got a defenseman here I don't need because it turns out Quinn Hughes is ready to go right now, and, what are we going to do? Quinn Hughes is ready to play for the Canucks. Do you want a defenseman? We'll take Stetcher. Deal. and something gets worked out where the Canucks get one of those wingers they need, and then I'll see you for Stetcher and a draft pick deal. Something. I'm just using that as an example. Hockey Guy says this trade. Anyways, there you go. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Again, this is just from me looking over rosters and just saying, here's what I think they may be looking for. I may be completely off base. Could very well be. It'll be interesting to look at this and say, all right, how far off was I? What did they sign? What did they bring in? And how many rookies end up filling these needs? Because, again, I'm not assuming any rookies fill these needs for these teams. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And this is one of those times of the year that I really, really enjoy free agency. I love this. This is when it feels like NHL 18 at the end of the year when you're like, oh, free agency! And you're all excited because you get to trade players again, and it's free agent time, and this is awesome. It's a great time. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, like and subscribe. Those buttons are your friends. So go ahead and give them a little tap. I'll talk to you again soon.